Hello and welcome to TALRadio. At TAL, we connect those who are willing to give to those who are in need. My lovely listeners and my dear audience, you're listening and watching to a wonderful series called Self-Coaching. And when I say self-coaching, you know who's going to be the guest. Let's welcome Andrew Tallents. Andrew, welcome to TALRadio.
Hi, Sandy. It's great to be here again.
Thank you so much. It's really been a long time.
Yeah.
So really looking forward to some amazing self-coaching tips from you. So let's start. The topic for today is technically it's about leading teams effectively and developing a coaching kind of a leadership style. So when we talk about that, the first thing that comes to my mind is what it really means to lead the team coaching leadership style and not the traditional way.
Yeah, we can usually work this out just by what we experience in a culture when we walk into it. So let's say that one of us walks into a hospital, walks into a library, walks into a business. We'll get an immediate sense about whether there's a coaching culture within the organization. And the way we'll know that is because if we go and ask 5 different people what they're doing in the organization and what their purpose is, there'll be alignment. Everybody will say almost the same thing. It will feel as though people have the right to talk. It will feel as though people don't mind criticizing other people in a constructive way. And it will also feel as though there is alignment in terms of the people within the organization. So that's how we know that coaching leadership is taking place, because of what we feel. If we walk into any of those places I've mentioned and it feels as though people aren't talking to each other, or there's a lot of mistrust going on, or whether they actually feel they can't talk to each other, or they can't really say what they think. We get a lot of this in politics. Then sometimes we know then maybe a coaching culture isn't taking place. It's much more command and control, the traditional type of style. So that's probably the best way that people can feel it. And then we can go on later to talk about how people can create it.
In fact, when I was actually, trying to get some information on this particular topic, all I could really think about, whenever we talk about coaches, we really sometimes most of the time we associate it with, athletics or sports or something, because generally we have a coach there.
Absolutely.
So moving on, what are the core principles that define a coaching approach in a leadership?
It's really difficult for leaders to develop this over time, but the best way to describe this is very simply 3 things. So the first is, as a leader, rather than me thinking that I'm always right, I need to start thinking maybe I'm not right. And therefore, how can I find out from the team and the people in the organization what other solutions might exist to the problems that we have, and listen to those. So that's how we start to develop a coaching leadership style. That's the first thing. The second thing is, which again leaders find very difficult to develop over time, is this ability to listen. So rather than me speaking to you now and thinking, what is it I need to say? And then when you're talking, what is it I need to say next? No, I'm going to listen to you, create the space to listen to you, and then respond. So we always tell good coaching styles in leadership about how well somebody listens. Do they really feel as though they're listened to in that sense? And then the third is, it actually feels as though the decision making is actually coming from within the team. It's not just coming from the leader. So even if the leader is not right and is creating space and listening, if the leader is still making all the decisions, it doesn't usually mean a coaching culture is taking place. So the leader has to do those 3 things really: collective decision making, not prepared to take the decisions all the time, not being right, and also really, really active listening.
So that takes me to my next question, that, in all this scenario, whether it's like self-coaching style or, leadership style, or it is about the traditional way of coaching, how can leaders really assess their style of coaching? Like, what am I really doing and what kind of style do I fit into?
Yeah, there is a questionnaire online. So this one I've devised myself. So if if you type in self-coaching for leaders, you'll be able to find a little questionnaire. And also if you go onto our website, you can find that as well. And all it is about 20 questions, and it allows you to work out where you're on that journey in terms of taking a coaching style. It usually provides some surprising results because, as we'll discuss later, it starts from within again. We can't just feel as though we're going to coach people if we're not coaching ourselves properly. So that's the best place to do that. Also, there are some other good assessments out there we've talked about in the past around DISC, which people will be aware of. And also you can do a variety of personality tests just to understand what kind of style do you have. Is it more directive? and authoritative, or is it much more inclusive? And that'll give you a sense about where you are right now.
Okay, I really wanted to ask something that, for quite some time, like, whenever I talk about the kind of a questionnaire, whenever you give those examples, most of the time you actually have prepared your own questionnaire as such, which are available online. But how do you prepare them? I mean, if you don't mind discussing, like, do you assess people, or it's like over the kind of experiences that you have, with your career?
Yeah, so a lot of it's experiential. So what kind of traits does a leader who's taking a coaching leadership style exhibit? How does that manifest then in terms of leadership of the team? And then we structure questions to get somebody to answer, are they doing that right now or are they not? So for example, how effective listening are you? Do you actually chair all your meetings, or do you allow other people to chair them? Are you always right? All these kinds of things to get people to understand where they are right now. And don't forget, many of us as leaders have only got role models from the last 10 or 20 years who have been much more directive and instructive and prescriptive and less coaching leadership style. And that's who we've learned from. So we have to learn ourselves a lot of the time. And some of these assessments can help us to do that.
Lovely. Thanks a lot for letting us know that. So moving ahead, whenever we talk about leaders, what kind of internal shifts are necessary to move from being a manager to a leader?
This is really hard for managers when we're doing it, and we've all done it in our careers. So we are paid to manage either things or people. And the very concept of managing is almost like coping. We're also trying to manage lots of things, and therefore it's herding cats. It's actually making sure things are happening. When we're managing, it's very much reactive. So we're reacting to things around us, and many of us are very good at that. The difference in leadership, and therefore where the step is required, is we need to stop managing and stop reacting and be proactive. So what that means is leading ourselves effectively, be very clear about where we're going, be very clear about what's getting in the way of where we're going. And then in the leadership role, it's about removing all the obstacles for the people that we're leading so they can get to the goals that they're actually working towards. So it's about moving from reactive to proactive. It's about moving from unfocused to focused. And it's about moving from, I guess, managing what's around us to leading ourselves and therefore others. So it usually means we have to create space for ourselves, because if we don't create space, all we're ever doing is managing what's coming towards us. So it's raising our heads up, looking ahead, and actually making sure we're actually being more rather than doing.
Okay, so something that's, that really prompted my mind, while listening to all this is, as we always say, and this is something that's really favorite part of mine, that we all have two different spheres of life. One is professional and one is personal. So when somebody develops this kind of a beautiful leadership style, does it affect their personal life also? Do they become more calmer and something in that area as well?
It can do. There's a really interesting point here, and it's very much in my coaching at the moment, where I'm coaching clients of mine, the point you've just raised. So many people will be able to relate to this. They work on themselves professionally. It means they can lead themselves effectively in work and become more of a leader. And yet, for some reason, when they go home, they can't do the same thing. And that might be because of the family dynamic, or the fact that they just find it harder and therefore they want to work less hard on it. So we almost have these two personalities. People say, I am this work person and then I'm a private person. But the way we can bring the two together, which we talked about in previous episodes, is if we can work on becoming present in our relationships, both professionally and personally, it means we will become more effective at leading ourselves in our relationships and therefore lead others. So we can be the same person, professionally and personally, if we just become more present. It just tends to be the fact that we focus more on that professionally to begin with.
All right. So talking about being more present, it's technically related to, a more self-awareness about yourself. Is it like a non-negotiable trait, to be an effective leader?
It is. You will know, and many people out there will know, that whenever somebody comes into a new role, they assess the team, they assess the organization. The first thing they say to their advisor or somebody else is, my team is not where it needs to be. I need to remove the finance person. I need to remove the human resources person. It's always somebody else. Yeah. And so therefore, I need to raise awareness about myself and how I'm leading first, rather than blaming other people. So it's absolutely critical for us to be self-aware, to work out how we're getting in the way of what's happening in the organization first, and then start to address the issues in the organization every time.
And besides self-awareness, what else, people need to develop in themselves to be more like, a coach style kind of a leader?
I think agility is the key thing. So I can say that 90% of the time it's okay for me to behave in the way I normally behave. And yet, when I'm in the company of somebody else that I'm trying to influence or lead, it might be that I need to change my style slightly in that relationship, maybe 10% of the time, to make sure that we get an effective result. So that links to self-awareness, that I'm aware that I'm behaving that way, and then agility to be able to change who I am in that moment to make sure I get the most out of the person. That's really hard for many leaders to do because they always assume, because they're the leader, that everybody else needs to change around them. And that's not always the best way to do it. So they're probably the two key things.
And besides that, I've read somewhere that, active listening and powerful questioning, that also helps a lot. So is it true? Like, do they also play a role in being, one of the best leaders or probably a coach style leader?
It is. And there's a really interesting tip here. And it's about where this comes from. So if ever we feel stuck as leaders or managers, if ever we're not sure what to say next, if ever we're stumped about something or we're not really sure where to go, the best thing to do in that moment is to become curious. And curiosity is not a defensive position or a negative position. It's about a real, okay, I wonder if, what's the possibility of something here? So it's where it comes from. It's a kindness type of thought about what I'm curious about, which always leads to a question. Oh, okay, well, if you were to do this, what would you do? Or if we could do this a different way, what would that look like? Or how do other people do this? And so therefore, we are curious with some really lovely questions, but it's where it comes from. It's not a defensive questioning to protect myself. It's very much questioning and then active listening to the responses that are coming back. And what I love is a little technique which people can use out there. So let's say I ask you, Sandy, to give me a few ideas about something we could do. Whatever you say to me, rather than me say, yeah, but we've done that before, or, oh, thanks for that, Sandy, but actually we won't do that, and then putting your idea down, what I can do is say, what I really liked about your idea, Sandy, was, and I pick one thing, it might be more than one thing, but one thing, and then I use the word and. And what also has come to me now is maybe we could do this as well. So it's a build. And that's the way we can build from curiosity, others' ideas, bring them in, as opposed to me just asking the question, they're not taking on board what it is you say to me. So it's a lovely technique that leaders can use.
Lovely. Thanks a lot for the practical example. But I would really like to know another, practical example from yours, self-coaching series itself, and especially, when you coach leaders, like how effective listening has actually resolved a lot of issues in the team. I mean, if you don't mind sharing.
No, absolutely. I think the best way to think about this is most leaders tend to chair their meetings. So let's say we've got 6 to 8 people around a table that meet weekly, whether that's online or physically, and usually it's maybe an hour or two. Inevitably, the leader always chairs the meeting, sets the agenda, makes sure we keep to time. What I say to leaders in a practical sense is let go of that role and rotate it around the room so that everybody gets a chance to lead it in their own way, not the way the leader would do it, the way that the individual team member would do it. And amazingly, when we do that, the leader can actually take a different role. They can actually listen. They can actually look at what's going on with the dynamic. They don't have to be the controlling influence. So I've seen many leaders do that very effectively, where they start to let go of some of the power they have within the meeting and the team, and other people step forward into that space. And then you see more effective delegation going on. So that they're probably the things that come up for me where it's worked most effectively, where the leader takes the initiative.
It's really lovely, especially when you said about this boardroom meetings, when and the leaders technically give their role to other people, their colleagues and everybody else. I could really visualize that. Yeah. That it's really effective because, you do have somebody else who's technically your leader, but still has the ability to listen to you, at least for some time.
Would be nice.
Actually, true. So moving on, when we talk about leadership style, so how does adopting to a coaching leadership style technically impacts teams' motivation? Does it really do that? Or it's just like for some time it does, and then after the meeting is done, you're back to square one?
Yeah, there are 3 things that are important here from the team's perspective. So if the leader is taking a coaching leadership style, it means the team members collectively and individually will feel 3 things. The first thing is they'll actually feel more understood. So rather than just being told to do things, being directed to do things, being guided to do things, they're being understood about why they can't do things or what's important to them. So that's the first thing. And when we're all feeling a bit more understood, we feel more motivated. The second thing is when we actually feel listened to and consulted, in terms of involved in the decision making, we automatically have more engagement with the decision because we're actually contributing to it. It might be one of my ideas or a colleague's ideas gets taken up. So that's the second thing. There's more engagement from the team because the leader has been listening. And then the third is actually just feels much more collective. So from a position of we're all in this together, the leader has created an environment where there's collective decision making and we're all actually in this moving forward to the goals. It might be quite challenging. So there usually feels more of a sense of belonging as well if the leader is taking this kind of approach. If the leader isn't taking this approach, it can feel divisive. It can feel as though we're never listened to. We're not really involved in the decision making. So what's the point? And we leave it all to the leader to make the decisions, which goes back to the traditional style.
All right. So moving on, how can self-coaching can really help leaders to stay aligned with coaching principle in technically a very high pressure environment?
Yeah, I think this is all about some of the things we talked about in the past about the leader really taking responsibility for self-awareness, which we talked about, and then creating the space so that they can actually create the coaching culture around them. That's really hard because most businesses, when they're under pressure, are being judged on results. Sure. But if what we do is actually in the short term, put in the space and time to discuss and make these decisions collectively using a coaching approach, it means we're going to get there more quickly and more effectively than if we actually just rush there. So there's a false economy, I think, in terms of making decisions quickly and not taking this coaching approach. If we can actually be more engaged, we'll actually be much more sustainable in terms of our success if the leader is taking this approach. But it's much more self-coaching, self-leadership, all about the space and therefore bringing the team forward in terms of how they're coached. And also encouraging those leaders to take a coaching style with their teams as well. So they're listening to their teams.
Andrew, like most of the companies, in fact, all of the companies probably that at least I know of, probably, our listeners must be aware about, they do have a lot of, portfolios, a lot of sections. For example, you have the technical wing, you have the accounting, you have the financing, you have the sales, you have the marketing. But I just said that sales is technically one of the most toughest job to really, and so I was just wondering, when we talk about sales leader, I mean, it would be a little off the topic, but since we're talking about leaders and they really have a very important role in the companies to play, so does this kind of a coaching style, does it help them as well? Because they're always on the nose.
But this is a really interesting point you make. This is a really good time to me bring in where we are right now in terms of on the coaching journey is there's many AI tools out there. I use one as well, which allows individual leaders or managers to coach themselves to work out how to then coach others effectively. And one of the key areas that this is employed in is sales. And the reason that it's employed in sales is because you and I both know when we've been sold to, there's two approaches. Either somebody's going to try and sell me something even if I think I don't need it, or they're going to use a coaching style where they'll take the prospect from where they are right now, ask very curious questions, really give lots of space, coach the prospect through a process where they work out and qualify them whether they're going to be right for this product or service. And by the time they get to the end, the prospect actually recognizes they need the service because they've been coached about why it's useful for them. So absolutely. Now, the problem with a lot of sales leaders is they've actually been rewarded in terms of promotion because they're really good at individual selling. And a lot of that has been necessary around process, around systems as opposed to coaching. So yeah, it's very valid for sales teams because again, if we can get them to own their own issues and problems and how they sell, they're going to be much more effective and we need to listen to them more.
True, and that actually came to my mind because I know they are one of the, you could say they're always on the toe. They're always just running around, hushing around. You'll always hear some or the other thing happening in the sales section. So, that's how it came to my mind. So moving ahead, are there any kind of rituals or reflections or questions that leaders can really ask themselves to stay in a certain kind of a coaching mindset?
Yeah, I think this comes down to having a regular habit around a particular time of day or time of week where we do reflection. And not many leaders fit this into their busy schedules, but it's so important. And when we reflect, there's a lovely thing that Marshall Goldsmith talks about. And Marshall Goldsmith talks about the 6 daily questions. So you can do this on a daily basis or weekly. And all it does is actually ask yourself, for example, did I do my best today to actually listen intently and effectively to everybody that talked to me? Did I do my best today to actually give myself space and time to actually think about the important things? Did I do my best today in terms of being kind to myself and others in my relationships? And when we're answering these questions, another 3 or 4 that you could go through, all this allows us to do is actually just have a sense check about whether we've been trying hard enough. It's not judging about how effective we've been, because that would be an unfair judgment. All we can do is try our best in these areas. And so if we do that in terms of how true we are to being a coaching style leader, then that's what we can do on a daily and weekly basis, just to check in and recognize that. It's linked to self-awareness again. And importantly, what Marshall talks about, if you really want to do this properly, is get an accountability buddy where, and it could be anybody, it could be a partner, a friend, somebody in the business, where you actually at the end of the day or the week, tell the other person how you scored against those things. So they're holding you to account. It's not just a case of asking the questions and letting yourself off the hook. You're telling people, I got a 7 today, maybe I could have done an 8. I need to work a bit harder at this. So he talks about having that accountability partner as well.
Lovely. Thanks a lot for letting us know that. So, we're literally coming to the end of the segment. But before I let you go, there's one very important question that's really been, I'm really very inquisitive about that, if a leader, if they find certain kind of a resistance towards their kind of a leadership style, when they're trying to shift from a traditional to a coaching style, how can they really navigate their way through it?
This is a really, really difficult topic for many leaders, because if they are enlightened about what it is they want to do with their leadership style, they've also got to get buy-in from their stakeholders. So the simplest way of saying this is they've got to spend time with their key stakeholders who are providing the resistance, to understand where the resistance is coming from, why, really build trust with those key stakeholders. So again, it's being the self-coach, being the self-leader. And in doing so and being curious, you find out where the resistance is, as opposed to just feeling it. You find out where it is. And then you can work with that resistance and try and then influence people to come to your way of thinking. And the best way to describe that is just being the adult in the room, because we can all throw our toys out of the pram and say, nobody's listening to me and why aren't they backing me? But actually, if we're being very, very sensible and we're talking about the benefits of the coaching culture, normally the stakeholders come around over time. So that's the best way to take that approach.
Lovely. So I hope all the leaders listening to us at the moment, or probably in the future also, do really understand. I mean, they have understood that, what is technical differences between the traditional way of coaching and the coaching, leadership style, basically. All right. So thank you so much. Thanks a ton to my lovely audience. And Andrew, thank you so much for being on TALRadio. Thanks a lot. Have a great day ahead and keep on listening to TALRadio.